Sorting my cards, nothing bad happening. It's just a normal day being a flesh and blood fan. The controversy alarm? What have Legend Story Studios done this time? PCG Grading? Prize cards? Time to get to the bottom of this one. So yesterday we got some news from Legend Story Studios that said that starting from the calling Singapore, all new gold foil prize cards will be pre-graded by PCG. So let's take a look into this and see whether or not it's a good thing or a bad thing. Judging by Twitter, it's the end of the world, but it's just Twitter. Anyways, before we get into this video, if you like Flesh and Blood, then please consider subscribing to this channel. I talk about deck techs, news, reviews, all sorts of things Flesh and Blood, so make sure to subscribe to stay up to date. Anyways, let's get into the video and see why this is such a big deal. So, as I mentioned in the intro, Legend Story Studios mentioned that all of the gold foil prize cards from this point onwards are going to be pre-graded by PCG. Now, they won't all be slabbed. I know that some people were talking about slabs at local events and things like that, but there is a different kind of grading strategy depending on the event that you inevitably go on to win. If you are at one of these smaller events, like, you know, like ProQuest, Battle Hardened, and some callings, I think, as well as some national championships, your card will come pre-raw graded. That's probably the first time I've heard that description. Essentially, what's going to happen is that PCG will run their eyes over the card and put it through their grading criterion curriculum, and any cards that come up at a 9 or above are eligible to be handed out as prized pieces to the best players of Flesh and Blood. Anything below that gets chucked in the grinder along with those gold foil extended tunics. So as we can see from the photograph released, it's a little top loader with a little Legend Story Studios sticker on the top, just essentially saying foil sealed for freshness. Now, the bigger events, however, will come actually fully graded and slabbed by PCG. These are your prize trophy cards, your extended tunics and Crown of Providences and Starvo cards. Man, I want to grind that up so bad. Essentially, PCG will take the prize cards for these events and put them through their full grading process. Anything 9.5 or above is eligible to be handed out as a prize, and anything less than that is aforementionedly chucked in the grinder. So now that we're up to date, and this is some news of something that's happening, Twitter inevitably exploded as it did before. Not as much as it did with the extended gold foil tunics, but that's because they only talked about destroying cards rather than actually destroying them on camera. On that note, LSS, I actually want to see proof that all of the 9.4s and below are destroyed. I need to get content from somewhere. They should run a show. I'm going to give you this one for free, LSS. I want to see an article on your website called The Weekly Grind, where you just grind up all of the cards that fail the grade. Oh my god, can I host the Weekly Grind? That would be amazing. Let's start with Starvo. Anyways, all joking aside, I think that this is actually a good thing. My initial hot take before I explore like the reasons why, and people can fight with me in the comments, is that I think that this is actually a good thing. I understand that some people have some reservations about PCG's grading. There have been some reports in the past of them having to regrade cards because of their criteria being maybe a little too lax or too harsh in places. However, if it enables a prize card to be given out at a certain quality grade, I think that that's a good thing. Ultimately, if these things are just printed and handed out, you want to make sure that your prize cards, even just for photo opportunities, look as good as possible. And for players that obviously get something that is, you know, nice looking, something they can be proud of for their achievement. No one wants a miscut card that is pre-curled and just awful looking as a prize, because ultimately what that says is that you take no pride in your game. And on the converse, this shows that LSS do take pride in their game by wanting to make sure that these cards are verified as being nice. Another thing is that a lot of people have been questioning LSS's decision to actually partner with PCG. I think it's a good idea because PCG is being run by Matt Rogers, who is pretty closely connected to the Flesh and Blood community at the moment, and also it's a local company for them. I mean, if I had a grading company that was pretty semi-reputable and was just down the road, yeah, I would probably partner up with them as well, because it's easier to get your grades rushed through for your tournaments. It's, you know, you're supporting your local business, your local economy, you're, you know, sticking with a player who's well known with your game. I think that despite maybe a slightly shady grading start, I still think it's the right call. One thing that I have heard people mention though is that this may affect the value of the card. If we're introducing grades into prize cards, then someone getting a 10 or a 9.5 means that someone will be handed a prize card of the same card that will ultimately be worth more or less than someone else's based on the subgrade. And ultimately the idea as well that any cards graded 9.4 or below will be rarer than their higher counterparts I think we need to break this one down a little bit to understand exactly why I don't think this is the case. Anything destroyed at 9.4 or below, yeah, I don't think it's going to be worth that much more. I mean, you can take a look at PSA 1 Charizards in Pokemon. Some PSA 1s are essentially considered a meme card at this point, where people claim low pop numbers on like PSA 1s, 2s, and 3s, but they're never ever going to outstrip the high number of PSAs 7, 8, 9, and 10. It's just going to be a meme. Now, the other thing is that when it comes to collectibles, there is this concept. I don't know if someone else ever mentioned this term or if it's completely wrong, so if they did, I'm sorry, but it's the idea of the one-way conversion. I think that applies here. Let me explain what that means before pretending like I'm overly technical. So the one-way conversion is the idea that a product can be converted into another graded product, however it cannot be converted back, i.e. booster boxes should always be more expensive than booster packs because you can break a box to get packs. Packs should always be more expensive than singles because you can break packs to get singles. Now, I do understand if you pull a super high rarity card, that is going to be worth more, but ultimately the chance of pulling that should kind of form a bit of a triangle up. You know, if you buy a sealed old school 1990s booster box of something, it's probably going to be worth more than any individual single in the set. I'm sure people will find reasons why that's not true, so let me know down below. We'll have a nice spirited discussion about it. But the same idea applies here. If we're handing out PCG graded 9.5s, 10s of some prized cards, anyone can crack the slab, run their nail down the side, send it on to get regraded, and bam, you have a PCG 7 Crown of Providence gold foil. Whatever reason you would want that, I don't know. But the idea is that I can take a PCG 10 graded card and convert it into a PCG graded 7 or 6 card without pretty much any specialized tools, training, energy, whatever. I don't need any training at all to open a card and down its grade. Now, if I got a PCG graded 7 card, it would be much more difficult for me to open that card and get it to a 10 grade. Probably nearly impossible to do so. So that means that because we have engaged in that one-way conversion, now we've essentially lowered the value of the card. The idea that something can be converted but hasn't been converted is somewhere where the value lies, and that's why I think that the 9.5s and 10 grades are not going to be worth any less than the lower grades. Now, a lot of people also have been making the argument that they don't like PCG as a grading company. Totally understand, but if PCG is not your flavor, crack it out of the case, it doesn't matter. Ultimately, I think that this is a good idea for the delivery method of the card rather than the long-term storage of the card itself. The idea that LSS can go ahead and get a card pre-graded at 9.5, give that card over to a player in a condition that is verifiable, I think that that's a good thing. One thing though that I am concerned about is the pop report. I do think the pop reports on PCG are probably going to be skewed a little bit by this. Let's take a look at a PCG pop report just to better illustrate my point. Let's look at, I don't know, extended gold foil tunic. So one of the things that we can see here on this pop report is that ultimately we've had 9.5s, 9s, and 2 8.5s graded for the extended gold foil tunics through PCG. By this standard, 3 of those cards would have been destroyed and 2 of them would have been given out as prize cards. Now the thing is though, when those cards are being destroyed, I know LSS are going to do the weekly grind hosted by the Ragamuffin man. However, ultimately when those cards are destroyed, they will still remain on the pop report, and I think that this could really muddy the waters for people who get grade 8.5s, 8s. As time goes on and maybe 10, 20 years in the future, people are sending in old gold foils to get graded and will naturally, through maybe rough storage, maybe buying and selling, someone will get a card that ultimately does grade at an 8 or a 7, and that's a respectable grade 20 years down the line. I think the pop report may be skewed depending on how many tries it takes LSS to actually get it right. Let's say, for example, there's a really bad batch of prints that aren't visible to the naked eye, but let's say that the surface is kind of bad and it drops the grade down to a 9, and there's like 100 cards on the printing sheet. There's 100 cards that will be entered into the pop report that will ultimately no longer exist. This will play havoc with future prices for anyone that's involved in long-term speculating on cards. It will cause havoc for new people getting old cards graded in 20 years time. I'd like to know if those cards are going to exist outside of the pop report or what's going to happen there, but really that's my only concern about this. I'm probably not going to engage in that type of market, so it doesn't really affect me, but I do understand that some people who are heavily invested in grading their collection are probably going to be slightly concerned by this. But ultimately, if you don't like PCG and you don't like the whole thing, you think it's terrible and that it should never happen, go ahead, win your tournament, get your PCG graded card, grab a screwdriver and crack that bad boy right out of there. Personally, I don't use graded cards. I've never graded a card before in my life. If I got handed one, I'd probably keep it. But I mean, I play my cold foils in the sleeve. I don't even double sleeve them. I just lay them right down on the table. Who cares? So that I do understand that this opinion that I'm giving is fully from the perspective of someone who isn't really interested in grading and hasn't engaged with that community. However, if you have graded cards in the past or you are interested in grading with probably even PCG, let me know how this affects you. I'd be really interested to hear the other side of that story. And if you would like to talk to me further and maybe the YouTube comment section isn't your thing, I'm pretty active over on Twitter as well, so make sure to follow me down on the Twitter link below. Anyways, thanks for watching this video and I'll see you guys next time.